My name is Hannah Reed, and I was 34 years old when I learned that a family can use a child's heartbeat as decoration while treating the child herself like an inconvenience. The photograph was taken 6 hours after my 7-year-old daughter, Grace, came out of open-heart surgery. Her skin looked translucent beneath the hospital lights. A breathing tube had been removed, but wires still crossed her chest, and the monitor beside her bed kept drawing green proof that she was alive. Grace lifted 2 fingers in a tired little peace sign and whispered, "Send it to Grandma. Tell her my zipper still works." She called the scar down the center of her chest her zipper. I sent the photograph to our family group chat. 14 people saw it. Beneath the picture, I wrote, "Grace is awake. The repair worked. She keeps asking whether anyone is coming." My brother Derek replied first. "Busy. Handle it." Then my mother Linda answered, "She lived. Stop making her our problem." I stared at those words until the letters seemed to lose their shape. Around me, machines clicked and breathed. A nurse adjusted Grace's blanket. Somewhere down the corridor, another mother began crying with relief. 12 relatives remained silent in the chat, an aunt who had worn a Team Grace bracelet, and 2 church friends who had called my mother brave. Not one person challenged her. I typed, "It's okay." Then I placed the phone face down beside Grace's hand, kissed her forehead, and walked to the stairwell so she would not hear me break. 3 months later, on a humid Tuesday night in July, my mother dropped her phone onto the carpet of the church fellowship hall. At almost the same moment, Derek knocked his phone into a steak dinner, while 6 clients watched him turn white beneath a television screen. What aired that night lasted 7 minutes and 43 seconds. It ended the charity foundation they had created in Grace's name, triggered a state investigation, destroyed Derek's carefully polished career, and placed my mother's beloved family name on a public registry she could never pray away. But the television report was not where this story began. It began in February, inside a cardiologist's office, when Dr. Naomi Okafor closed the door with both hands and sat across from me without opening Grace's chart. Grace was coloring a purple horse at the small table near the window. She had come for what I believed was a routine follow-up. She had been born with a congenital valve defect, repaired when she was an infant, and I had watched technicians study her heart while pretending not to study their faces. That morning, the technician had stopped making conversation halfway through the scan. Dr. Okafor spoke carefully. "The repaired valve is failing faster than we expected." I heard the sentence. I understood every word. Still, my mind reached for something smaller. "Medication?" She shook her head. "We need surgery, open heart surgery, ideally within 8 weeks. Grace kept coloring. The purple horse gained wings. I asked the questions responsible adults ask when terror has entered the room and expects paperwork. Success rate, recovery time, school absence, insurance approval, risks, dates. I wrote everything in a notebook while my hand pressed so hard the pen tore through 2 pages. Outside, in the parking garage, I sat behind the steering wheel and made a list. Call insurance, request leave from work, find lodging near Cincinnati Children's Hospital, arrange schoolwork, explain surgery to Grace without teaching her my fear. Then, against every lesson experience had given me, I called my mother. Linda Reed lived 20 minutes away in the same Dayton house where Derek and I had grown up. She was 61, active in church, famous for funeral casseroles, and capable of making strangers feel. People described her as dependable. What they meant was visible. When she answered, I said, "Mom, Grace needs another heart surgery." Silence filled the line. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking behind her. Finally, she asked, "Who knows?" I thought she meant doctors. "What? Have you told the family? The church? Anyone online?" "No, I just left the appointment." Another pause. Then her voice changed. It became brighter, organized, almost energized. "Don't post anything yet. Let Derek handle it properly." I should have understood then. Derek was 38 and sold luxury homes in Dayton's northern suburbs. His face smiled from a billboard near Route 4, teeth bright enough to survive bad weather. He was the child who could turn any event into an announcement. Promotions became celebrations. Minor injuries became family emergencies. Other people's achievements became proof of his support. I was the opposite. I worked as a staff accountant at a small firm and rented a modest 2-bedroom home with Grace. I paid bills before buying clothes, kept receipts in labeled envelopes, and believed problems became less dangerous when numbers were placed beside them. In our family, Derek created appearances. I absorbed consequences. My father's death 9 years earlier had hardened that arrangement. Linda turned grief into community admiration. Derek spoke at fundraisers and accepted handshakes. I handled hospital forms, funeral invoices, and the mortgage statements nobody wanted to see. Whenever I asked for help, my mother reminded me that I was strong. Whenever Derek demanded attention, she reminded me that he was sensitive. That was how love worked in our house. One child received protection, the other received responsibilities disguised as compliments. 48 hours after Grace's diagnosis, I discovered what "let Derek handle it" meant. A coworker named Melissa approached me in the break room, wrapped both arms around me, and said, "I donated. I'm so sorry." I stood there holding a paper cup of coffee. Donated to what? She pulled out her phone. On the screen was my daughter's school photograph beneath a red heart logo. Above it, in large white letters, were the words "Hearts for Grace." The fundraiser had already collected $18,000. The organizer was Derek Reed. I clicked the fundraiser link and read every line. The description said our family was facing the greatest trial of our lives. It called Grace our brave little fighter and promised that every donation would support her surgery, recovery, travel, and future care. It included details I had only told my mother: the failing valve, the 8-week surgical window, the hospital in Cincinnati. At the bottom, Derek had written, "As Grace's uncle, I will personally ensure every dollar is used responsibly." I called him from the break room. He answered on the 4th ring with music playing behind him. "You launched a fundraiser using my daughter's name? Good morning to you too. You used her photograph. It's public, it's her school picture. She is 7. He sighed as though I were slowing down a meeting. "Hannah, people want to help. I know how to organize this. You should be grateful. I want access to the account." "You don't need access, you need to focus on Grace. I am Grace's mother, and I'm the one who knows fundraising." That sentence stayed with me because Derek had never raised money for a sick child before. He had raised money for political breakfasts, golf outings, and his own business awards. To him, giving was not an act, it was a stage. I told him to transfer the campaign to me. He said we would discuss it later and hung up. By evening, the total passed $25,000. My mother shared the page with 3 church groups, 2 neighborhood pages, and an alumni association. She wrote captions about sleepless nights and a grandmother's worst fear. People commented that she was strong. Women I had never met promised to pray for her. Nobody asked whether Grace was frightened. Nobody asked whether I had eaten. The next morning, a local reporter called me at work. She said Derek had arranged a family interview and wanted Grace included if possible. I declined. That afternoon, my mother arrived at my house without warning. She brought a casserole and irritation. "You made Derek look foolish. I asked him to stop using Grace. He is helping you. He is controlling money raised for my child." She placed the casserole on the counter with enough force to rattle the lid. "You always make help difficult." I almost laughed. Instead, I asked whether she had read the fundraiser terms. She waved one hand. "Derek handles business. You handle the medical side. Everyone contributes." In my family, contribution meant Derek stood under lights, while I signed forms in fluorescent rooms. The hospital required a surgical deposit before confirming Grace's date. I emailed Derek the invoice, copied my mother, and requested that he pay the billing office directly. I also attached instructions from the fundraising platform, explaining how an organizer could transfer control to a beneficiary's legal guardian. He did not reply in writing. He called 2 hours later. "The money is protected." From what? Mismanagement. I looked at the spreadsheet open on my work monitor. Whose mismanagement? He paused. "Don't turn this ugly. I'm asking for an invoice to be paid." "You're emotional. My daughter needs open heart surgery." "Exactly. That's why someone stable should handle the funds." I wrote down the time of the call. The next day, Derek invited me to the parking lot outside his real estate office. He stood beside a photographer holding an oversized check for $2,000. Behind him, a banner displayed the Hearts for Grace logo beside his company name. He smiled and placed one arm around my shoulders. "Look relieved," he whispered. The photographer counted down. I held the check because the hospital needed money, and because Grace was waiting at school for me to pick her up, and because humiliation becomes a luxury when your child has a surgical deadline. That photograph appeared online before I reached my car. "First distribution to our courageous Grace," the caption read. "Family takes care of family." The comments praised Derek's generosity. Not one person asked why he was presenting donated money as though it came from his pocket. I deposited the check and bought a gray 3-ring binder. On the first tab, I wrote fundraiser. I printed the original page, each campaign update, every public total, my emails, the transfer instructions, the deposit invoice, and the photograph of Derek handing me money strangers had given for my daughter. Numbers had always calmed me. They did not change their tone, rewrite conversations, or accuse you of being ungrateful. They waited quietly until someone was ready to read them. By the beginning of April, the fundraiser had collected more than $68,000. Grace's surgery was scheduled for April 14th. The night before we drove to Cincinnati, she packed her stuffed rabbit, 3 coloring books, and a pink sweater she could not wear after surgery. I let her bring it anyway. At bedtime, she asked who would be at the hospital. I named the doctors and nurses. "No, Mom, our people." I sat beside her and said Grandma and Uncle Derek knew the date. "Will they come?" "I think they will try." It was the closest I could get to a lie without saying one. At 5 the next morning, I carried our bags to the car while Grace slept under a blanket in the passenger seat. My mother sent a text before sunrise. "Praying, big day for all of us." Derek posted a photograph of a candle. Neither asked where we were staying, neither asked what time surgery started. At 7:26 a.m., nurses rolled Grace toward the operating room. She wore a blue cap covered in yellow suns. Just before the doors closed, she lifted one hand and called, "Don't let Grandma worry." I stood there after she disappeared, holding the empty air where her fingers had been. Then I entered the waiting room alone. At noon, I checked the family group chat. 14 members had seen my update. No one had replied. Not even my mother. At first, I told myself silence meant people were sleeping, working, driving, praying privately. Families have excuses the way old houses have drafts. You learn where they enter and eventually stop noticing the cold. By 1 in the afternoon, I had memorized the waiting room. 11 floor tiles separated my chair from the coffee machine. The television played a home renovation show with the sound turned low. A father across the room kept rubbing his wedding ring. A nurse named Bonnie brought me coffee I had not asked for and placed it beside my notebook. "You shouldn't have to count tiles alone," she said. I looked at her. She nodded toward the floor. I had not realized she had noticed. At 4:10, my phone buzzed. I grabbed it so quickly, I spilled coffee on my sleeve, expecting the surgical team. It was a social media notification. Derek had tagged me in a live video. The screen opened to a hotel ballroom in Dayton. String lights hung above round tables, dressed in white. A stage stood beneath a banner covered with Grace's face. Her school photograph repeated across the backdrop, beside red hearts and the words "Arts for Grace Gala." My mother stood near the front, wearing a navy evening dress and a satin sash that read Team Grace. Derek wore a tuxedo. 400 people were applauding. For several seconds, I could not understand what I was seeing. Then the camera turned toward a large cake decorated like a heart. A local radio host announced that the evening celebrated courage, community, and one extraordinary little girl. My daughter was still in surgery. Her grandmother was cutting cake 90 minutes away. I scrolled through the event page with both hands shaking. The gala had been planned for weeks. Tickets had sold for $100 each. There were auction packages, sponsor tables, branded photographs, and a printed program featuring a letter from Linda Reed about the pain of watching her granddaughter fight for life. My mother had written that letter without once asking Grace how she felt. A video showed Derek at the podium. "Family means showing up," he said. The room rose to its feet. I nearly laughed, but the sound died somewhere behind my ribs. Then the operating room doors opened. Dr. Okafor walked toward me in a blue surgical cap. The moment I saw her face, the ballroom disappeared. "The repair was successful," she said. "Grace is stable." My legs stopped working correctly. I reached for the chair and missed it. Dr. Okafor caught my arm while I cried into both hands. Successful. The word did not feel large enough for what it returned to me. They allowed me into the pediatric intensive care unit that evening. Grace looked smaller than she had that morning. Wires crossed her body. Tubes disappeared beneath blankets. Her face was pale, but the monitor beside her bed kept making a steady sound I wanted to record and play forever. Around 8:30, her eyelids moved. "Mom? I'm here." She swallowed. "Did Grandma come?" The question entered me more carefully than any knife. "Grandma knows you're safe." Grace thought about that. "Tell her my zipper still works." I smiled because she needed my face to say the world remained trustworthy. "I will." She raised her thumb halfway before the effort exhausted her. I took one photograph. Then I sent it to the family group chat. "She's awake. The repair worked. She keeps asking whether anyone is coming." All 14 names appeared beneath the message. "Seen." Derek replied first. "Busy. Handle it." His response arrived while applause from the gala continued on another tab. Then my mother typed, "She lived. Stop making her our problem." I read it once, then again. Then so many times the sentence became a shape instead of language. The machines beside Grace continued proving that her heart was working. My mother's words proved something else. 12 relatives saw the exchange. My Aunt Carol, who had shared the fundraiser 7 times, said nothing. My cousin Nathan, who had purchased a gala table and posted that family comes first, said nothing. 2 church friends who had called my mother a warrior said nothing. Silence can be louder than cruelty when enough people choose it together. I typed, "It's okay." Those 2 words had protected everyone except me for 34 years. I placed the phone face down on Grace's blanket and kissed her forehead. "Bathroom," I whispered to the nurse. I walked past the elevators, through a fire door, and into the stairwell. Then I pressed my fist against my mouth and cried so hard my knees struck the concrete. I cried for the 9 hours alone. I cried for the gala. I cried for the child asking for people who were celebrating her absence. Most of all, I cried because some part of me had still expected my mother to come. When I returned, Bonnie had pulled a chair closer to Grace's bed. She did not ask where I had been. She simply placed a warm blanket over my shoulders and sat beside us until midnight. The gala ended at 11. My mother posted 43 photographs. In none of them did she mention that Grace had awakened asking for her. The next morning, Derek uploaded a video titled "A Night of Hope." It opened with my mother holding Grace's framed photograph beneath stage lights. "We will never let this family face hardship alone," she said. I watched the clip from a vinyl chair beside my daughter's bed. Then I opened the gray binder in my lap and wrote a new date. April 14. Under it I wrote 4 words. They were never coming. That was the first honest sentence I had written about my family. It frightened me more than the surgery had, because doctors had promised to repair Grace's heart. No one could repair people who preferred an audience to a child, especially when the audience kept rewarding them publicly for pretending. We came home 5 days later with a bag of medications, a folder of discharge instructions, and a child who moved carefully because every laugh pulled against the healing line down her chest. The house looked exactly as we had left it, which felt almost insulting. Dishes waited in the rack. Grace's crayons remained scattered across the coffee table. The world had not changed its furniture simply because mine had split open. For the first 2 weeks, I slept in short pieces on the couch beside her. I measured medicine, checked her temperature, recorded every complaint, and learned how fear hides inside ordinary moments. A cough became a question. A wince became a calculation. When she slept too quietly, I touched 2 fingers to her wrist until I found the beat. My family did not visit. My mother sent flowers addressed to "Our Brave Grace," with a card signed by the Hearts for Grace Foundation, although no such foundation had existed when we entered the hospital. Derek sent nothing. The bills arrived before Grace could climb the stairs without help. Insurance covered much of the surgery, but covered is one of those words that sounds generous until the statements begin. Deductible, coinsurance, out-of-network anesthesia, parking, gas, lodging, meals purchased from vending machines at midnight, 2 unpaid weeks away from work. I built a spreadsheet. The direct cost to our household came to $11,486. The fundraiser total had reached $112,000. I emailed Derek again. This time, I attached every invoice, every receipt, and a summary showing what Grace's treatment had cost us. I requested reimbursement and a complete accounting of the donations. 3 days passed, then a transfer appeared in my bank account. $3,000. The memo line contained one word: final. I called him. He answered with the polished warmth he used when showing a house with cracked foundations. Glad you got it. Why does it say final? Because that closes the personal expense portion. There is no personal expense portion. The campaign says every dollar supports Grace's surgery and recovery. The language is broader than that. What language? The mission. There was no mission. There was my daughter. He exhaled slowly. Hannah, we are building something bigger. I looked at Grace sleeping beneath a blanket on the couch. What is bigger than the child whose face raised the money? The foundation. He said it as though I should already have known. Then he told me he had a showing and ended the call. I opened my laptop. The Grace Reed Foundation had been registered with the state 9 days after surgery. Derek was listed as director. Linda Reed was treasurer. Its mission statement promised to support families facing pediatric cardiac challenges through advocacy, awareness, and community engagement. The website was live. At the top was a photograph of Grace taken 2 Easters earlier. She wore a yellow dress and held a basket against her hip. Beneath it, visitors were invited to join Grace's fight. Grace had never seen the website. Neither had I. There was a donation button, a volunteer form, a sponsorship package, and an announcement for the 2nd annual Hearts for Grace Gala. 2nd annual. The first event had happened less than a month earlier. I scrolled until I found a page titled Our Story. It described Derek and Linda as the family members who had stood at the center of Grace's medical journey. It praised their leadership during the surgery and claimed the foundation had been born in a hospital waiting room. I had been the only family member in that waiting room. My name appeared once. Hannah, Grace's mother, continues to focus on day-to-day caregiving. They had reduced the person who signed every consent form and slept beside every monitor to an employee in her own child's life. I printed the entire website. The gray binder received a second tab. Foundation. A week later, Grace and I were driving home from Cincinnati after her follow-up appointment when traffic stopped at a red light on Salem Avenue. A bus shelter stood beside us. Grace's face covered the advertisement panel, not the Easter photograph, the image from the fundraiser. Her missing tooth, her blue school background, the red heart logo. Beside her face were the words, "Turn courage into community." At the bottom, smaller but unmistakable, sat Derek's real estate logo. Same navy color, same gold border, same telephone number displayed on his billboard. Grace leaned toward the window. Mom, why am I on that chair? I gripped the steering wheel. Some people put pictures where other people can see them. Did you tell them? No. Did they ask me? I looked at her in the mirror. She was not angry. That made the question worse. She was genuinely trying to understand the rules adults were teaching her. No, sweetheart. She considered this. But they should ask me. Yes. The light turned green, but the driver behind me had to press his horn before I moved. That evening, I called my mother and requested a conversation. She invited me to Sunday dinner. The table was set when Grace and I arrived. Pot roast, folded napkins, a vase of flowers from the gala. Derek was already there with his wife, Rachel, and their 2 children. My mother prayed before the meal. She thanked God for family unity, generous hearts, and the opportunity to turn hardship into purpose. Then everyone began eating as though my daughter's face were not attached to advertisements across Dayton. I waited until the children went into the living room. Then I placed 3 printed pages beside my mother's plate. The foundation registration, the website, the bus shelter photograph. Where is the money? I asked. Derek leaned back. My mother smoothed the tablecloth with one hand. This family, she said calmly, runs on its name. I had heard many strange defenses in my work. That was the first one that sounded like a confession. My mother did not look embarrassed. She looked patient. That was worse. She folded her hands beside her plate and said, "Your father left me a mortgage, a funeral bill, and 2 grown children who still expected the world to keep moving. The only thing I had was the Reed name. I glanced toward the living room where Grace sat on the carpet beside her cousins, coloring a house with a purple roof. What does that have to do with her medical bills? Everything, Linda said. People give because they trust us. They gave because Grace needed surgery. They gave because Derek knew how to tell the story. Derek smiled without warmth. I looked at Rachel. She kept her eyes on her plate. So the money is staying with the foundation? It is being managed, Derek said. For what? Awareness, outreach, future events. What about the hospital? My mother's expression tightened slightly. The hospital was paid by insurance. Grace's bills were not. You received $5,000 out of $112,000. Derek leaned forward. You are acting like the money belongs to you. It was raised using my daughter's face, diagnosis, surgery date, and private medical information. It belongs to the mission. There was no mission until after the money arrived. The room went still. My mother's voice dropped. You need to understand something, Hannah. One child's difficult year can become something lasting. We are turning pain into purpose. I looked at Grace through the doorway. Her chest had been opened 3 weeks earlier. She still needed help washing her hair. She woke at night because she dreamed the hospital doors were closing again. One child's difficult year, I repeated. My mother mistook my quietness for surrender. She survived. Now we can help others. You have not finished helping her. Derek pushed his chair back. This is exactly why you should not control the funds. You are too close to it. I laughed once. He looked offended. You are her uncle, I said. You were not close enough to enter the hospital. My mother stood, not in front of the children. The children were not invited to the gala either? Her face changed. Not much. Linda never lost control in obvious ways. Her jaw set, and her hand flattened against the tablecloth, as if keeping the entire room from lifting. Take Grace home, she said. We will discuss this when you are calm. I gathered my papers. At the doorway, Rachel touched my sleeve. Her fingers were cold. I'm sorry, she whispered. Before I could answer, Derek called her name from the dining room. She let go. That night, after Grace fell asleep, I opened the binder and wrote down every sentence I remembered. Then I searched the foundation's social media pages again. A video from the gala had been posted in full. I watched it from beginning to end. There were speeches from sponsors, an auction for a weekend cabin, and a slideshow of Grace's photographs. Images from birthdays, Christmas, her first day of school, photographs taken inside my home, copied from my mother's private albums and displayed to hundreds of strangers. Near the end, Derek returned to the podium. He raised a glass and announced that the Grace Reed Foundation was pledging $25,000 to the cardiac unit at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. The ballroom stood. My mother pressed one hand to her heart. The applause lasted 32 seconds. I watched the clip 3 times. The following morning, I called Maria Delgado, the hospital family services coordinator who had helped with our billing paperwork. I asked whether the hospital had received a donation in Grace's name. She became careful. I can check with development. Please do. 2 days later, she called me back. No donation has been received. Could it still be processing? There is no pledge agreement on file either. I emailed her the video. She replied in writing that the hospital had never authorized its name for the gala and had received no payment from the foundation. I printed the email. The binder grew heavier. So did the truth. My family had not simply withheld money from Grace. They had promised money to the hospital that saved her life, accepted applause for giving it, and kept every dollar. I sent Derek and Linda a certified letter requesting a full accounting of the fundraiser and foundation. I gave them 10 business days. They responded in 4. My mother called a family meeting. When I entered her dining room, there was no dinner. Derek sat beside Rachel. My mother occupied the head of the table. A manila folder waited in front of the empty chair. I sat down. Derek began with concern. You have been under tremendous stress. My mother nodded. We think the surgery affected your judgment. I looked at Rachel. Her face had gone pale. What is in the folder? Linda slid it toward me. Inside was a professionally drafted media release granting the Grace Reed Foundation perpetual rights to Grace's name, image, likeness, medical history, and personal story. Perpetual. They wanted ownership of my daughter's scar. In exchange, the agreement promised nothing. Sign it, my mother said. Then we can stop treating each other like enemies. My fingers closed around the pen. For 34 years, obedience had arrived before thought. I could already feel the old sentence rising. It's okay. Then I heard Grace's voice at the bus shelter. But they should ask me. I placed the pen on the table. No. Derek's chair scraped backward. My mother stared at me. I stood, took the unsigned agreement, and put it inside my binder. You cannot take that, Derek said. I just did. Outside, my hands shook so badly I dropped my keys. But for the first time, I did not mistake fear for a warning to surrender. Sometimes fear is only the body recognizing that the old rules have finally ended, even before the mind is ready to live completely without them again. The next morning, I submitted a misuse report to the fundraising platform. I attached the campaign page, hospital invoices, 2 payments totaling $5,000, foundation registration, bus shelter advertisement, Derek's gala speech, Maria's confirmation, and the unsigned media release that tried to turn Grace's life into property. Then I pressed submit. For 48 hours, nothing happened. On the third afternoon, the campaign page changed. A gray notice appeared beneath Grace's photograph. Vinci ad Yushi and Foder. Withdrawals were suspended pending documentation. Derek called 11 times before dinner. The first voicemail sounded friendly. Han, there's been a misunderstanding. Call me. The fourth sounded offended. You had no right to interfere with foundation business. The seventh became threatening. You are exposing yourself legally. By the 11th, he had abandoned every polished voice he owned. You are destroying this family over money. I saved each message. Then the group chat awakened. The same relatives who had watched my mother dismiss Grace after surgery found paragraphs inside themselves. Aunt Carol said disagreement should stay private. Cousin Nathan wrote that donors trusted Derek. 2 church friends reminded me that forgiveness mattered more than pride. No one asked why the hospital had received nothing. No one mentioned the gala. No one typed Grace's name except to accuse me of using her illness to punish my mother. I read every message, took screenshots, and muted the conversation. At 9:40 that night, Linda left one voicemail. Her tone was level, tender. Hannah, I do not know what you think you are doing, but you will not burn this family's name over money. Call your brother, fix what you broke. I played it 3 times. She never mentioned Grace, not once. The next afternoon, my mother posted publicly. She did not use my name. That was part of the skill. She wrote about a family enduring a painful season, a young mother overwhelmed by medical stress, and a charitable foundation protecting donations from impulsive decisions. She asked her community to pray for wisdom, unity, and everyone affected by emotional strain. Hundreds reacted. Women who had watched me grow up wrote, "Stay strong, Linda." Men from church praised her leadership. She replied with gratitude and red hearts. By Monday, her version had traveled farther than mine ever had. A client at my accounting firm asked my manager whether I was stable enough to handle confidential records. 2 mothers at Grace's swim lessons stopped talking when I sat near them. At the grocery store, a woman from church touched my arm and whispered, "Your mother loves you. Do not make decisions you cannot undo." I looked at the cart beside me. Grace's medication, milk, bread, apples. What decision do you think I made? The woman lowered her voice. To take money meant for sick children. For 1 second I could not breathe. That was how quickly reputation could reverse a crime. My family had taken donations raised for Grace, and somehow I had become the thief for asking where they went. I returned home and added a new divider to the binder, retaliation. On Wednesday morning, someone knocked at my door. The woman outside wore a county badge and carried a tablet. She introduced herself as a child services caseworker and explained that an anonymous report had raised concerns about a medically fragile child living with a mother experiencing instability. The hallway tilted. Still, I opened the door. Grace was home with a cold. She sat at the kitchen table drawing, while the caseworker inspected our refrigerator, medications, appointment calendar, pantry, bedrooms, and discharge instructions. I answered questions. Did I understand Grace's condition? Yes. Was I following medical advice? Yes. Did I have support? I paused. Professional support. The caseworker glanced at the binder. What is that? Documentation. She looked through the medication chart, hospital forms, follow-up schedule, insurance statements, and appointment notes. Her expression softened. This will likely close quickly. Legally, it did. Weeks later, the letter called the complaint unfounded. But Grace had heard enough from the stairs. After the caseworker left, I found her sitting on the landing with her stuffed rabbit against her chest. Is that lady taking me away? I sat below her. No. Did I do something bad? Never. Did you? The question hurt differently. No. Someone told her we might need help, so she came to check. Grace studied my face. We are okay. I almost repeated the old phrase automatically. Instead, I said, we are safe. That is more important. That night, after she fell asleep, I stood in the kitchen and understood that my family had crossed a line no apology could erase. They had used my daughter's surgery to collect money. They had used her face to advertise. Now someone had used the possibility of losing her to frighten me into silence. I could not prove who made the report, and I would never claim certainty without evidence, but I could prove everything else. My phone buzzed at midnight. The message came from Rachel. Can you meet tomorrow? Somewhere Derek will not know. We chose a diner beside the interstate, far from our neighborhoods. Rachel arrived and sat in the back booth with untouched coffee and a manila folder beneath one hand. She looked exhausted. For several minutes, she spoke about weather, school schedules, and nothing. Then she said, I keep the books for Derek's office. I waited. He cannot reconcile a bank account. He only knows how to spend from one. She pushed the folder across the table. Inside were statements from the Grace Reed Foundation. The first page showed fundraiser deposits. The second showed where the money had gone. A lakeside resort, Derek's truck, my mother's kitchen contractor. I looked up. Rachel's eyes held something heavier than guilt. Use these right, she said. Not to win. Right. Then she released the folder. For the first time, I held proof that did not come from my own records. And for the first time, my family's public story had nowhere left to hide. Rachel left before I did. I remained in the diner with the bank statements spread across the table, each transaction more ordinary than the betrayal behind it. A $14,000 deposit to a lakeside resort was labeled Strategic Retreat. Monthly payments on Derek's new truck were labeled Community Outreach Vehicle. A contractor's invoice for my mother's kitchen renovation was labeled Administrative Office Improvement. There were restaurant charges, advertising packages, and a payment to Derek's real estate photographer. Grace's heart had paid for polished cabinets and chrome wheels. I copied every page, placed the originals in a sealed envelope, and added a new divider to the binder. Back records. Rachel had clipped a business card to the final statement. Tess Calloway, the Channel 7 reporter who had filmed Derek holding the oversized check. I emailed her tip line that Friday. She called Monday morning. We met in a conference room at the station. Tess wore no television smile. She closed the door, placed my binder on the table, and listened for 20 minutes without interrupting. When I finished, she looked at the cover. Grace, everything, she read. I needed one place where nobody could rewrite it. She nodded. I did the original story. I know. I put your brother on television and called this community generosity. Her voice held no defensiveness, so I helped build the picture they used. That honesty made me trust her more than sympathy would have. Tess explained that a report like mine needed 3 supports: documents, independent confirmation, and a source willing to speak on camera. I have the documents, I said. You do. We still need an official agency to confirm there is an active complaint. The Attorney General? Charitable Law Division. I had already found the form. And the source? Hull. You. I looked through the glass wall toward the newsroom. What about Grace? Tess hesitated. The producers will ask. For what? A brief interview, maybe a photograph, something that lets viewers understand who was harmed. No. She had not finished, but I did not need the rest. No image, no scar, no hospital footage, no school, no bedroom, no interview. Tess studied me. The story will be harder to sell without her. My family already turned her into an advertisement. I will not do it again because the people holding the camera have better intentions. For the first time, Tess smiled. Then we used the mother and the math. The phrase sounded simple enough to hold. Before I left, she warned me what exposure would cost. If the platform confirmed misuse, donors would likely receive refunds. The money would not come to Grace. Public reporting would also end any possibility of a private family settlement. You may lose every dollar, she said. I thought of the hospital bills stacked beside my coffee maker. I have never seen a ledger where truth pays retail. She wrote that down. 2 days later, Cincinnati called. Grace's follow-up imaging showed a residual narrowing near the repaired valve. Dr. Okafor said it was manageable but should not wait. A cardiac catheterization was scheduled for January. Not another open-heart surgery. A vessel, a balloon, 1 or 2 nights, routine to the hospital. Never routine to a mother. The billing estimate arrived the following week, $9,400 due before the procedure. A new insurance year meant a new deductible. I placed the estimate beside the frozen fundraiser statement. $17,000 remained in the account, close enough to solve the problem and legally unavailable because of the review I had initiated. For several hours, I hated myself. Then a certified envelope arrived. The letterhead belonged to a law firm Derek used for property closings. The document ordered me to stop making false and defamatory statements about the foundation, Linda, and Derek. It threatened litigation, damages, and emergency relief. I read it twice. Then I called an attorney, recommended by my employer. She asked one question. Are your claims supported by records? I looked at the binder. Yes. Then do not exaggerate, do not speculate, and do not destroy anything. Truth is a defense. The letter was not law. It was weather designed to make me cancel the trip. That night, headlights crossed my kitchen wall. My mother entered without knocking. She looked smaller than she had at Sunday dinner. No church makeup, no careful posture. She held her purse in both hands and sat across from the binder. For the first time, she told me what happened after my father died. His life insurance had lapsed. The mortgage remained. The church brought food because Linda had spent decades building goodwill. Reputation kept us alive, she said. The Reed name was the only account that never reached zero. For one dangerous moment, I understood her. She had confused public approval with security because public approval once fed her children, but survival had become worship. She had placed Grace on the altar. My mother removed an envelope containing $10,000 and set it beside a fresh copy of the media release. Take this for January, she said. Sign, and we can end everything. I pushed both papers back. You are asking me to sell her story so I can afford to protect her heart. I am asking you to save this family. No, you are asking me to save its image. She stood slowly. At the door, she repeated her creed. This family runs on its name. The following morning, I arrived at the Attorney General's office before it opened. My complaint contained 40 pages of exhibits. I signed the affidavit beneath the word true. Then I drove directly to Channel 7 and signed an interview agreement with every condition written in ink. No grace, no compromise, no more silence. When I placed the binder on Tess's table, the room changed. Until then, every page had been private resistance. Now those pages were evidence moving toward daylight, and I understood that consequences had finally begun traveling in the correct direction. The studio was colder than the hospital waiting room. A technician clipped a microphone to my collar. Another adjusted the chair. Tess sat across from me with the gray binder between us. We began with numbers. $112,000 raised. $5,000 delivered to Grace's household. $25,000 pledged publicly to the hospital. 0 received. $14,000 spent at a resort. Truck payments, kitchen renovations, advertising. I answered in my audit voice, calm, exact. Every number had a receipt. Then Tess asked about April 14th. I opened the family group chat on my phone. She's awake. The repair worked. She keeps asking whether anyone is coming. My throat tightened, but I continued. Derek replied, busy, handle it. The studio became still. My mother wrote, she lived. Stop making her our problem. Tess let the silence remain. And what did you answer? I looked toward the camera. It's okay. The words sounded different outside my family, smaller, sadder. I have said that my entire life, I continued. Whenever they took something, whenever they needed me to absorb a cost, whenever they chose Derek and called me strong, I said it was okay. It was never okay. I was just paying for peace with pieces of myself. No one interrupted. I thought of Grace sleeping beneath hospital wires while a ballroom applauded her name. My daughter survived surgery, I said. That does not mean what they did stopped mattering. Survival is not permission to exploit someone. Tess asked whether I wanted revenge. No. What do you want? I want donors to know where their money went. I want the hospital's name cleared. I want my daughter to grow up understanding that love does not require silence. The interview lasted 46 minutes. The report would use less than 8. Before I left, Tess told me the station would call Derek and Linda for comment on Monday. The segment would air Tuesday at 10. That gave my family 30 hours. Derek used the first 12. He called my employer, accused me of stealing confidential financial information, and threatened to sue the firm. My manager asked for my account, read the documents, and told him any further communication should go through counsel. My mother used the next 6. She contacted relatives, church leaders, and everyone who had ever eaten from one of her casserole dishes. By Monday evening, I had received 57 messages asking me to think of the family. Nobody asked the family to think of Grace. Tuesday arrived anyway. At 6 that evening, 4 hours before airtime, my mother stood on my porch holding a thick envelope. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. Grace was at the kitchen table drawing. Some negotiations should never happen where children can hear the price adults place on them. Linda extended the envelope. $40,000. I did not take it. Derek is selling the truck. I borrowed against the house. This covers the procedure and whatever else you think you are owed. What do you want? You call the reporter. Tell her the figures were incomplete. The foundation will close quietly. The money will be repaid. We remain a family. The envelope was heavy enough to solve January. It could cover the hospital deposit, missed work, medication, and months of breathing without calculating every grocery receipt. For one terrible moment, I wanted it. My mother saw that. Grace never has to know, she said. That was the sentence that decided everything. Grace would know. Maybe not about the envelope, maybe not about Channel 7, but one day she would know what kind of mother I had been when truth became expensive. Children learn the rules we live, not the ones we explain. I pushed the envelope toward Linda. My silence is what made all of this possible. Her mouth tightened. You are burning down the only roof this family has. My daughter is not a roof. She is not a name. She is not a campaign. You still have 4 hours. You could use them to call her. My mother looked through the window. Grace's purple crayon moved across the page. She still asks about you, I said. Linda's face broke for 1 second. Then she turned, walked to her car, and drove away without calling. At 9:58, I sat on the living room floor with the lights off. Grace slept down the hall. The television volume was low enough that I could hear the refrigerator humming. The report began third. Tess appeared beside a graphic titled, Follow the Money. The numbers built across the screen. $112,000 raised. $5,000 delivered. $25,000 hospital pledge, unpaid. Then came the bank statements. Resort. Truck. Kitchen. The Attorney General confirmed an active investigation. The fundraising platform confirmed donor refunds were being prepared. Finally, 2 gray message bubbles filled the screen. My voice read them aloud. Busy, handle it. She lived. Stop making her our problem. Across town, my mother watched from the church fellowship hall during bridge night. I learned later that the room fell silent, table by table, until her phone slipped from her hand onto the carpet. Derek watched from a steakhouse where he was entertaining clients. He had asked the hostess to switch the television to Channel 7 because he thought the teaser might concern a competitor. When his face appeared beside the fundraiser total, he stood so quickly that his phone struck a plate and landed in gravy. In my living room, the woman on television said, "It was never okay." The woman on the floor finally believed her. I turned off the screen. Then my phone began vibrating. By midnight, there were 214 unread messages. I did not open them. I walked down the hallway and stood beside Grace's bed. Her breathing was slow, ordinary, miraculous. That sound was the only verdict I needed that night. Behind me, the phone continued filling with outrage, excuses, threats, and sudden concern. For once, I let everyone else carry the noise. By morning, the story had escaped Dayton. A national website reposted the message bubbles. A morning television show used 20 seconds of the report in a segment about charity fraud. Strangers who had never met Grace were reading my mother's words and asking what my relatives had avoided for months. How could a grandmother say that? The consequences did not arrive like thunder. They arrived as emails, statements, canceled contracts, and official envelopes. Derek's brokerage released a notice saying his conduct did not reflect company values. His listings disappeared from the website before lunch. Within a month, his Route 4 billboard advertised mattresses. The Grace Reed Foundation announced that it would dissolve to avoid distracting from Grace's recovery. Even then, they used her name. The fundraising platform completed its review and refunded the remaining donations. I watched the public total fall toward zero. Each refund meant less help for Grace, but the money returned cleanly instead of becoming another truck payment or kitchen cabinet. I expected grief. What I felt was relief. The money had stopped carrying my daughter's face through rooms she had never entered. 2 days later, Maria called from Cincinnati. Her voice sounded brighter than usual. "Donors have been contacting the hospital," she said. "They have refund notices and want to give directly." The hospital already had a family assistance fund. It was audited, administered internally, and applied straight to patient accounts. No private organizer, no gala, no family name. By the following Friday, enough money had been donated to cover Grace's January deposit, the remaining surgery bills, and part of the next family's expenses. Bonnie donated twice. The second contribution appeared under the name Tile Counter. I cried when Maria told me, not because strangers had rescued us, but because they had understood the difference between helping a child and being seen helping one. Grace underwent the catheterization in January. Dr. Okafor guided a balloon through a blood vessel and opened the narrowing near the repaired valve. Grace spent 2 nights in the hospital, complained about the food, collected 6 stickers, and demanded pancakes on the drive home. At her follow-up, Dr. Okafor studied the images and said, "Excellent." Grace looked at me. "Is excellent better than successful?" "Much better," I said. In the spring, the Attorney General's investigation ended in a settlement. Foundation funds were repaid into the state's donor reimbursement system. Derek and Linda signed an agreement preventing them from soliciting charitable donations in Ohio again. Their names appeared on a public registry. The name my mother had protected above everything else was now attached to the truth. Some days, that felt like justice. Other days, it felt like evidence of how completely we had all lost. Rachel filed for divorce in March. She moved with her children 2 streets away from us. We began trading school pickups, groceries, and emergency contacts. The cousins who had once seen Grace only at carefully arranged family events now built blanket forts in our living room and argued over cereal. One afternoon, Rachel asked whether I hated her for waiting so long. "No," I said. "I understand what tables can train people to accept." She nodded because she did. My mother never apologized. A year after the surgery, an envelope arrived in her handwriting. Inside was an old Hearts for Grace donation card. Grace's Easter photograph remained printed on the front. On the back, Linda had written one sentence, "You are still a Reed." I stood at the kitchen counter holding it for a long time. Then I opened the gray binder, now nearly 400 pages thick. I slid the card behind the settlement agreement and closed the cover. She was right, I was still a Reed. But the name no longer told me what I owed. We hold Sunday dinner at my house now. Maria brings lemon cake. Bonnie comes after her shift when she can, sometimes still wearing scrubs. Rachel and her children occupy the loud end of the table. Grace sets the napkins crooked and insists that her stuffed rabbit needs a chair. Not one adult at that table shares my blood. Every person there showed up. One Sunday in May, Grace counted everyone with her fork. "Everybody came," she said. The words nearly broke me, but in a gentler place. During dessert, she reached for milk and knocked over the glass. White spread across the table toward the roast platter. "It's okay," she announced, grabbing napkins. The room went quiet. I knelt beside her. "No, baby, some things are not okay." Her eyes widened. "Am I in trouble?" "No, spilling milk is an accident, we clean it up." But when someone hurts us, lies to us, or uses us, we do not have to call that okay just to make them comfortable. Grace considered this seriously. So the milk is okay, but Grandma was not? Children can place truth in one sentence after adults spend years hiding it. The milk is fixable, I said. What Grandma did was wrong. Grace nodded, wiped the table, and asked for more cake. That is the family I chose. Not people who share a last name while machines beep in another city. Not people who turn suffering into branding and silence into loyalty. Family is the nurse who notices you counting tiles. The worker who protects a child's privacy. The woman who brings crooked bank statements to a diner. The reporter who accepts the mother and the math. Family is whoever comes when there is no audience. I lost the family I was born into because I finally stopped saying it was okay. Grace gained something better. She gained a mother who would never teach her to confuse endurance with love. And whenever she touches the scar she still calls her zipper, I remember the photograph, the 2 messages, and the night 2 phones hit 2 floors. My brave daughter's heart survived. Somehow, so did mine. But neither of us belongs to their old story anymore.